was further strengthened when he was appointed Minister of Transport in 2012. DM Martins remains my leader and a great inspiration to me. He's an intelligent and highly knowledgeable man. He's a simple, humble man, a freedom fighter, a communist, and a great South African. I have no doubt that he's committed to saving the people of South Africa. This is a man who lives for the arts. He would invite me during weekends when he visited art galleries. He would teach me about paintings, the ideas behind them, and the artists behind these. As you may be aware, he writes and publishes poems. This is a man I have huge respect for. I could, however, not believe it when I heard that he said at the media briefing, I felt strongly that Deputy Minister Martins was trying to protect his own name at my expense. He knew that I had never met the Guptas until he had invited me to his ministerial house in Pretoria and introduced me to Duduzane Zuma and Rajesh Tony Gupta. This happened in September 2012. What he said at the briefing was totally not true, and I felt it important that I set the record straight. And I issued a statement to that effect. Of course, my response to the Deputy Minister did attract the attention of the evidence leader to this inquiry, who wanted to know the context of my response and the contents of the letter referred to in my statement. And I should perhaps pause and indicate, the Honorable Chair and Honorable Members, that when asked in the media briefing, Minister Ben Martins was asked what we discussed, the meeting between the Guptas when he invited me at his house. And let me put it there, there's a bit of sequence there. I was invited to the house. I was never told what was going to be discussed. I was the CEO of PRASA. I was invited by my boss, who's the Minister of Transport. He said, I need to see you. I went to the house. And then we sat there for about 20, 30 minutes. Tea was served. We had discussions about many things. Then two gentlemen arrived that I've never met before. The Honorable Minister introduced them to me, Duduzane Zuma and Tony Gupta. So I thought that perhaps it was very important for the minister or deputy minister to clarify that I went there in that context. But I think the impression was created that there I came dragging the Guptas to his house, and I thought that was unfair and comradely. If I met the Guptas, I wouldn't hide. There's no reason for me to hide. But in this particular context, that was not correct. The second issue I want to also address, Chair, is that in the media briefing, Honorable Ben Martins was asked what was discussed. And he then said, we discussed the board of PRASA. And as I stated in the statement, in my testimony, there was no reason for me to discuss the board of PRASA. I was the CEO of PRASA. The prerogative to appoint the board of the Passenger Rail Agency of South Africa was that of the minister. So there was no reason to discuss the board of PRASA with people I've never met in the first place. The minister introduced me to the Guptas, to Radha Tony Gupta, a member of the Gupta family, and to Duduzane Zuma. And he then stated very explicitly that the reason these people want to meet with you is because they are interested in the PRASA rolling stock program. And this was on the eve of my departure for Berlin in 2012, September 2012, because every 2 years in Berlin, there's what you call the InnoTrans, which is the biggest railway exhibition conference where all railway manufacturers, railway operators, railway financiers of railway rolling stock, and other people would gather. So it's a big event that takes place for an entire week. And in the middle of that, of course, there's what you call the Rail Leader Summit. And I used to be invited as one of the speakers every 2 years in that particular event. So I then indicated to the guys, well, thank you very much. I'm off to Berlin. On my return, I think that I'll hear what you guys are trying to offer. Then I proceeded to Berlin, and our chairperson, Honorable Chair, I got the shock of my life.
So, sorry, Mr. Montana. What was discussed at the meeting of the 12th of September, in September 2012, before your departure?
Well, there were two things. I was introduced firstly, and I was told the Rajesh Gupta as well as Duduzane are interested in our bid. There was a tender at that time for the supply of 600 new commuter trains to replace the entire fleet of metro rail that we have in the country. I think that that was the context. We didn't discuss in detail because I think that they were introduced. They didn't have details themselves. So I said, look, I'm going away. I'll be away for a week. I'll come back. And then you guys can present to me what you want to offer. And I traveled to Berlin. But in Berlin, I got a shock of my life. Because many rolling stock manufacturers had wanted to meet with me. And I was not keen to meet with them precisely because we were preparing, we're in the middle of a bidding process, as it were. But you know, with the InnoTrans exhibitions, information came to me from different manufacturers who wanted to confirm from me that they've been interacting with members of the Gupta family or people acting on their behalf, and that these people had told them that, number one, they're working for Lucky Montana, they're working for Ben Martins, and they're working for President Zuma. Now, these are people I haven't met, and they're collecting money, they're extorting money from rolling stock manufacturers, and saying that they're working for us. I was so furious. And at the end of the InnoTrans, on my way back, when I was in Frankfurt, I then called the Honorable Minister and requested that the chaps that I met before I left, can I see them tomorrow? I'm landing in the morning. Can I see them when we are there? The minister acceded to my request, and we met. I went to his house, and they came to join us. I didn't know when he called me to his house. And this time, he didn't know why I requested to meet with them. I thought he assumed that I was calling to continue with the discussions. But I was angry. It was a long meeting, but the first hour I spoke in the meeting. And I made it very clear I think at this time, of course, it was Duduzane and Rajesh Gupta, and they brought in a third gentleman, I think came from India. I didn't know his name. I can't recall his name exactly. So I then spoke to them. That the first thing I mentioned was that you are not working for government. You don't have a right to collect money in our names. That indicated to them that they are putting government initiatives at risk, because if they collect money, losing bidders will challenge us, particularly, and I was quite sensitive at that time, because if you look at Metro Rail, it was on the verge of collapse. And at that time, if you buy rolling stock and then somebody takes you to court over a 50 billion rand transaction, you're going to sit in court for 10 years. At that time, this system would have collapsed, as it were. So we fought in that meeting. And of course, the Guptas, or rather Tony Gupta and Duduzane, they were very shameless. Because one of the things they said to me was that, and Tony said it at the meeting, in the presence of the minister, one, that like you are not going to be at PRASA forever. We can arrange something for you, you'll get it in Dubai yourself. So the Dubai story doesn't start today. It dates as far back as 2012, as it were. And of course, I'll chair evidence leader. I'll finish my story with just reading extract from the letter that I wrote to my chairman in 2012, just for the honorable members to have a sense of what was my response to. So that's what they said. We will work with us. We'll then take care of you. That's effectively what they were saying. And I think that in my letter of 2012 that I'm releasing for the first time to this committee and to the country, I made it very clear that I'm not interested. We are not working together. I don't even know you. The second thing, of course, is that they felt that I met other companies They said, well, it seems that you favor a company like Bombardier. Transportation, as you know, Bombardier comes from Canada. And I said, I'm the CEO of PRASA. I've met, in preparation for this rolling stock, I've traveled all over the world. I've met the Chinese, I've met Europeans, I've met Koreans, to make sure that we prepare the market for these new trains that we're buying. And of course, they were furious, not with me, they were furious with Ben Martins. Because they said in a meeting, and again, it's something that when I read the letter will become clear. The Guptas, or rather a member of the Gupta family, was saying to the minister that we told you that we don't want Lucky. He's not cooperative, and you said he's your comrade. So that's what they were saying to the minister in this particular meeting. So that's what happened in that discussion. However, at the end of the meeting, and at that time I did, of course, confront them with the fact that I picked up also information that they convened a meeting in Zurich, in Switzerland, where various rolling stock manufacturers were summoned there. And I'm told that the meeting was chaired by one Salim Essa. I haven't met the gentleman. So that's what they were doing. And of course, at the end of the meeting, they then indicated that, look, we are pulling out of all of this, but we are going to continue working, and we'll work with China South Rail. That's what they did. And I think that if you look at the relationship, it becomes very clear, the China South Rail link, as it were. We proceeded with our rolling stock program. And of course, they indicated that the chap who came from India, who was managing the relationship with China South Rail, will speak to me. He called a week after that meeting. Of course, at that time, he brought with him a phone, a small phone, to say, look, we think when we communicate, you can communicate with us through this cell phone so that it's not picked up. Of course, I took this phone, the chap, the third, I can't recall his name exactly. And of course, I took this phone after the meeting and gave it to a chap in the street because I didn't know who was listening to me on the other side. So that was the first meeting. A week later, he called. And when he called, he then he came and brought CVs.
Sorry, who's he? The Indian chap.
The Indian chap, yeah. When he came, he brought in CVs, 2 CVs. And I think that I've submitted these CVs exactly as they were submitted. So these are not copies I've downloaded. These are original copies that I had that were given to me in 2012. They effectively asked and said, we want the 2 gentlemen to sit on the evaluation of the 50 billion rand PRASA contract tender. So they wanted to be part of the evaluation. The gentleman is Salim Essa, whom I haven't met, and Iqbal Sharma. I haven't met, but I'm aware that Iqbal Sharma was a member of the Transnet board and chaired this procurement committee, as it were. I rejected that request and indicated to them that we have a plan, and the plan is that the PRASA rolling stock, because of its size, because of its nature, it will be evaluated by the Department of Transport, PRASA, National Treasury, the DTI, and supported by a big team of transaction advisors. And that's what happened. I then proceeded to appoint a bid evaluation committee comprising of National Treasury, DTI, PRASA, and the Department of Transport. They were unhappy with that, and they went to the Minister of Transport, Ben Martins, to complain that I was uncooperative. That was not the end of the story. We moved beyond that. Honorable Chair, and when they realized that things are not working in their favor, they were becoming restless with the evaluation process. And the results of the evaluation process came from that team and transaction advisors, they worked with China South Rail, and China South Rail didn't make the shortlist. They pushed and said, well, if China South Rail is not there, China North Rail should also be part of that. China North Rail didn't make it. They had a company that they were partnering with South Rail called Victra. They also didn't make it. And the reasons why they didn't make it was not because of any political considerations, but it was because of the thorough consideration. If you look at towards the end of the, I think it's page 60, 6.1. If you look at page 6.1, you can see that there's the evaluation table. This is very same as the evaluation table that we tabled before cabinet when we finalized, when we sought approval for the rolling stock program. But if you look in the next page, page 62 at the top, we provide reasons why China South Rail, China North Rail, and China South Rail Victra, which was a partnership, didn't make it. Firstly, it is because they failed to meet one of the following: rolling stock specification, response to maintenance requirement specification, response to capacity and capability requirements, and response to programs and plans. Now, I want to emphasize to just put it in what I'm saying to perspective. We had put in very strict requirements or specification, particularly on the technology side, because we wanted the best trains for the country. We wanted to make sure that we buy trains that will serve the country for the next 40 years. So we wanted proven technology. And as part of the requirements, we then put the technology side, that any bidder must pass that at 100%, not below that. So that if you can't get all the technologies right, you can't give us the best trains. And some of the bidders left some of the forms and documents incomplete, which means they couldn't provide us with the solutions as they are. And I think that PRASA, in its record, has got all these documents to be able to deal with that. And I think that's where the big battle began. Evidence leader, they did everything to block the PRASA rolling stock. Firstly, they asked that the rolling stock program be cancelled. And we refused. They came back and said they want the PRASA AGM to be postponed.
Sorry, you keep on referring to they. Who's they, and who are they approaching specifically?
Thanks, Advocate. I know that I'm moving very fast as well, so I lose myself. When I refer to they, I'm referring to specifically Rajesh Gupta. I'm referring to Duduzani Gupta, and I'm referring to the third, Zuma. My apologies. Rajesh Gupta, Duduzani Zuma, and the Indian chap. Yeah, I'll call him an Indian chap for because I don't know the name. I was then traveling again at that time, but I met the Indian chap here at the Park Hyatt Hotel in Johannesburg, Sandton, or Rosebank rather, and it indicated that they feel politically there's a decision that has been made that the board of PRASA should be changed, and that the AGM of PRASA should be postponed to allow for that process to take place. And you'll see in my testimony, honorable members, that the AGM of PRASA was indeed postponed. Now, this is a meeting of the shareholder, but it was postponed. And I was not happy about that. So things proceeded, and I think that they were desperate to appoint the board. I did speak to the minister, and he gave me the assurance that what the Guptas wanted will not succeed. That is Minister Ben Martins. But I got the shock of my life when I met the Director General of Transport. At that time, George Mahlalela. George shared with me a cabinet memo And this cabinet memo was about the new board to be appointed for PRASA. That is in 2012. And I was unhappy because one, we're changing the board in the middle of a major procurement process. Now, if you do that, you are inviting trouble. Because then it means that the old board is not going to be able to make decisions on this. You're bringing in people who are going to make, and we knew the intention was to cancel this rolling stock because China South Rail and therefore China North Rail were not part of this process. I read the memo. I looked at the names. They put the name, the chairperson, the chairman of the PRASA, new PRASA board that they had as Mr. Jimmy Manyi. That was the name of the chairperson. And there are two chaps from India who were to sit on the board of PRASA. And I was unhappy, and I said, look, firstly, this is not an international company. It does not have international investors. Why do you want people from India to sit on this board? This is actually not even a Schedule 2 company. It is a Schedule 3B in terms of the classification of the Public Finance Management Act. So it didn't make sense. What I did, I then went to brief the chairman of PRASA, Mr. Sfiso Buthelezi, who's the current Deputy Minister of Finance. I explained to him everything. And I then said, look, I will resign from PRASA. If we succeed, if the plan to appoint the new board of PRASA succeed and interfere with this rolling stock program, I would then simply resign. But don't expect me to only resign. I'll convene a press conference and tell the country what you guys are up to. And it was on that basis that I wrote the letter, which I will then quickly read to close what I'm saying. And we know that subsequent to that, the Honorable Minister Ben Martins, as the Minister of Transport, he then took a very firm stance against these guys. He met with me and the chairman and said, look, there's no memo that will be going through. There's no changes to the board. He feels very strongly that the board at that time, led by Mr. Sfiso Buthelezi, should proceed and complete the work, and that we move. And that's how the Guptas were, or rather, the initiative by Rajesh Gupta and Duduzane Zuma failed because the evaluation came, and I think the results I'm putting in the last pages of this, the recommendation was made for what we call Gibela, which is led by Alstom, the French company. And I think that they're offering, I think that I've summarized, and then it was approved by the board, and later we submitted it to Cabinet. Minister Ben Martins submitted as a promise that he will not give in to that request. He then tabled it before Cabinet and it was approved. And immediately thereafter, because I was worried we were going to get some kind of agent interdict, immediately when Cabinet approved, I went to Park Station and announced the results so that whoever takes us to court, we had already moved. So, Chair, I think that in closing, I just want to quickly read the letter, just to summarize the context. The letter is directed to Mr. S.N. Buthelezi, the chairman of the board, and it says strictly private and confidential. And it reads thus: in the past few weeks, a number of concerning developments.
I think everybody has got a copy of the letter, ne? In front, every member has got a copy of the letter.
Thank you, Chair. There is the issue of the TNA business breakfast that you might want to touch on as well, which is a matter we're also dealing with your permission, Chair. Thank you. That's on page 64.
Chairperson.
Honorable members,
I think that instead of him writing the entire letter, he could highlight some of the areas which he deferred to this letter, because in his evidence in chief, he said that there are certain things that he's going to highlight in the letter. So maybe you could highlight those key issues so that we know of them.
Thank you. Honorable Kungubel.
Can you allow the smooth flow of this process, Chair? Let's allow Mr. Montana to present this letter the way he wants to, and then we'll actually ask him questions. I propose to allow you to go that way.
I'm not sure if members have seen that there are few letters that have just come in. There are 2 that I have just received. Have you received the 2 copies also? Yes. There are 2 copies also on top of this one that is being read now. Members, can we allow because we are intersecting the witness and the evidence. This time is the time between the evidence leader and the witness in front of us. I will give you time to interact. Let us leave this to the evidence leader, and the evidence leader did meet Mr. Montana before, and he would want Mr. Montana to read all the letters that are in front of us. Please, members, can we do that? Please. Thank you very much. Honorable Luyenge, do you want to say something?
No, since that was a proposal coming from us, I wanted to confirm that there is enough and sufficient consensus that we follow the route you are applying.
Thank you very much. Can you then, Advocate, do you want to say something? No. Can you continue then, Mr. Montana? Please do not interrupt the process, members. I know it's exciting.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. I'll read the letter first, and then I'll finish with the TNA breakfast, business breakfast is requested. And I think that I'll also speak to the context of the other letters, as it were. But I think, Chair, I prefer also to read the entire letter to give a sense of my feelings in 2012, because I know that a lot has since intervened, and I think that is very important to deal with that, so that I convey fully the sentiment. As stated earlier, the letter was directed to Mr. Sfiso Buthelezi as the chairman of the board, and it just said strictly private and confidential. And it reads thus: in the past few weeks, a number of concerning developments have emerged that have necessitated that I write this letter to you and express my discomfort and reservations regarding the same. All these events point to the board of PRASA not being given the space to exercise its oversight responsibilities and retaining full and effective control over the company. And equally, as the Group Chief Executive Officer, I'm increasingly finding it difficult to execute the company's goals and objectives in compliance with all relevant laws and governance principles in a manner that is consistent with both the Constitution and the legal succession to the SETS Act of 1989 as amended, which is the founding legislation of the Passenger Rail Agency of South Africa. The development of a situation relating the restructuring of the board of PRASA is most disturbing and will urgently require that the same to be discussed by the board soonest. Safe to submit that I and the board of PRASA should not be forced to engage in unlawful activities and be part of a process that would seek to undermine various laws and provisions of the Constitution of the Republic. I've previously reported to the chairman of my attendance of meetings at various periods with the Department of Transport, key advisors in the Ministry of Transport, and representatives of the Gupta family. It was prior to my departure for Berlin to attend the InnoTrans during the month of September 2012 that I was first introduced to representatives of the Gupta family and their relationship with one of the would-be bidding companies China South Rail presented. However, I had immediately on my return taken issue with them over what I considered to be attempts on their part of their representatives to extort money from international rolling stock manufacturers or original equipment manufacturers that had shown interest in the PRASA request for proposals for the design, manufacture, and maintenance of new modern commuter rolling stock, which was due at the end of September 2012. Some of the rolling stock manufacturers during my stay in Berlin brought to my attention the following. One, that they were under severe pressure to pay monies to these representatives. Two, that PRASA will be instructed to award to their preferred company irrespective of the competitive price and technology solution they would submit as part of their bid. And three, that they were informed that the PRASA AGM will be postponed to allow time for the board of PRASA to be restructured. And four, that PRASA will be informed to postpone its RFP. This truly materializes. Indeed, the AGM was postponed whilst I was still in Berlin. Requests for postponement submitted and attempts to restructure the board commenced immediately on my return. We have made it clear that a further extension of the closing date for the submission of bids was not an option for PRASA, considering the substantial risks that would face Metro Rail, considering that almost a third of its aged Metro Rail fleet would be due for retirement during the 2014-2017 period. And this explains some of the problems that we see with Metro Rail today. It was during these discussions that the representatives of the Gupta family directly, unashamedly, and unapologetically demanded that the minister restructure the board of PRASA. I was taken aback and continue to be surprised by the arrogance from a representative of the said family that they had the power, authority, and audacity to demand of and or instruct the Minister of State to restructure a board and dictate on how they should manage their portfolio. This is clearly unprecedented, disrespectful, and something that democratic South Africa should frown upon and confront. I've consistently advised the Ministry of Transport that the restructuring of the board of PRASA is not in the best interest of the company and the country, considering that strategic projects such as the Rolling Stock Fleet Renewal Program and National Signaling Upgrade Program have entered a critical stage of implementation. I furthermore submitted that this suggested restructuring of the board will destabilize our turnaround and modernization initiatives and will bring with it uncertainty in the company at this critical moment and affect the integrity of the procurement process currently underway and raise suspicion among bidding companies. I also emphasize that the current board of PRASA has just been appointed effective 1st April 2011 for a 3-year period. This is notwithstanding the fact that the appointment of the board members remains the prerogative of the shareholder. I had been given the assurance on many occasions by the Minister and the Department of Transport that the proposal for the restructuring of the PRASA board does not enjoy their support. In this regard, I was further assured by the Minister that at an appropriate time, he will engage with the chairman of the PRASA board to allay any fears of the restructuring of the PRASA board, which are accordingly reported to the chairman. Notwithstanding the confidential nature of these discussions, recent events have compelled me to put my concerns and discomfort in writing because I am now convinced that the above unlawful agenda has been taken to its logical conclusion. I am left with no option but to protect PRASA and my rights in accordance with my contract of employment and the laws of the Republic. There are two specific developments over the past 72 hours that confirm that we are on a slippery path. Firstly, I had a meeting with the Director General of the Department of Transport on Sunday, 28 October 2012, where it was confirmed that a memorandum recommended the appointment of a new chairman, Mr. Jimmy Manyi, and other PRASA directors have been processed and ready for submission to the Cabinet. This is against the many assurances given by our Honorable Minister and the Department of Transport. The truth is that the demand for restructuring of the PRASA board came as a demand from a representative of the Gupta family in meetings I attended in late September and during October 2012. The proposed changes are neither driven by the objective requirements of the business nor the interest of our country. They are also not informed by the need for the shareholder to strengthen the PRASA board so that it could deliver on its legal mandate. Secondly, I had a meeting with another representative of the Gupta family on Monday, 29th of October, and this is I'm referring to the Indian chap here. He reported that there is agreement at political level that PRASA shall be expected to cancel the RFP for the acquisition of new modern commuter trains if the tender is not awarded to CSR or any of the two other Chinese bidders. The restructuring of the board of PRASA is intended to achieve one goal: appointment of China South Rail, and I think that that was a typo in 2012, not today, as preferred bidder. If not possible, cancellation of the tender itself. The restructuring of the board is to be effected before the current board could finalize the appointment of a preferred bidder in November 2012, based on the proper and transparent adjudication process in line with the PRASA SCM policy and the laws of the Republic. I had made it clear that the procurement process for the new trains will run its full course based on the principles prescribed by our Constitution and the law, namely open, fair, transparent, and competitive bidding in the procurement of goods and services. I also made it clear that myself or the board of PRASA are not prepared to implement any unlawful instruction, and that there was neither a legal basis nor compelling reasons for the cancellation of the RFP. I've consistently advised representatives of the Gupta family, who clearly serves as champions of the commercial interest of China South Railways on this specific tender, that the only available route to win the tender is for CSR to submit a compliant and competitive bid that will be adjudged accordingly. The board and I are prepared to resign if government decides to serve the narrow interests of the Gupta family and Chinese companies and not those of our beloved country. I feel betrayed in spite of having treated these matters in strict confidence and having consistently advised the chairman and been given assurances by our honorable minister that the restructuring of the PRASA board was not on the cards and does not enjoy the support of the transport ministry. However, recent events as articulated above has shown me that the Ministry of Transport has contradicted these assurances. An unlawful and corrupt scheme is being pursued, underpinned by the introduction of new directors into the PRASA board who may not owe their loyalty to PRASA, but brought with the sole and specific mandate to manipulate the rolling stock tender. I must also add that the representatives of the Gupta family presented in one of the meetings a plan that I and the other people would be allocated shares that would be part of payments by CSR for winning the tender, the plan which I rejected contemptuously. And I've immediately and accordingly advised the chairman of the board and special advisor to the minister of this offer. I'm in the employ of PRASA and refuse. I'm in the employ of PRASA. This was in 2012, not today. So. I'm in the employ of PRASA and refuse to develop a corrupt relationship with either the Guptas or CSIR. These recent and unfortunate developments have the potential to irreparably damage the relationship between the Group CEO, PRASA board, and the shareholder. It is against the above background and attempts to impose these unlawful activities on PRASA that I want to propose that I negotiate my exit in the employ of PRASA. And it is clearly over with the current board of PRASA and the effective role of the Group CEO in delivering on its responsibilities. To this end, I wish to invoke the provisions of my employment contract, and in particular clause 13.4, that and I quote, that in the event that the employer seeks to terminate the contract for other reasons other than disciplinary reasons or poor performance on the part of the Group CEO, the parties shall negotiate a settlement agreement that pay the remainder of his contract and benefits, contract period, bonuses, leave days, as well as take into consideration the reputation of the Group CEO. In this regard, I will accordingly furnish the chairman with details of a fair settlement in accordance with clause 13.4 of my contract of employment. I do believe that it will be important to dedicate time to negotiate the settlement agreement and the board to make the necessary resolution on this matter before end of November 2012. I assure the chairman that I will avail myself to ensure stability and continuity in the strategic operations of PRASA, oversee the conclusion of critical contracts over the next 6 months, as well as ensure the proper handover of my responsibilities as Group CEO to the newly appointed board and or the newly appointed Group CEO. I will also in due course arrange a meeting with the chairman and submit more details concerning these recent developments as articulated about and the impact that they pose to the rolling stock fleet renewal procurement process currently underway. Kind regards, Tsepo Laki Montana, Group Chief Executive Officer, 30th October 2012. So, Chair, this is the letter that I wrote at that time. And of course, let me just say, Chair, that you mentioned the other letters. There's been a big assumption in the country. And I think that's why I say in my submission, if you look at the last page, and I want to refer honorable members to page 65 of my submission, the last page. I write in the conclusion, we defeated the Guptas and their associates. But we also defeated our own ANC comrades who are similar, if not worse, than the Guptas and their associates. We paid the price for this. And my letters that I wrote, Chair, the other two letters, I don't know if they have already been shared with the honorable members. But the context of this letter is that PRASA in 2014 became the battleground for big, powerful political and economic interests. And if you look at page if you look from page 20, from page 19, PRASA and state capture, you can see I mentioned some of the political forces that I had played at PRASA. I've taken a hard stance against the Guptas, as captured in my letter and as explained here. But unfortunately, it was not only the Guptas who were doing their own thing at PRASA. And I happened to offend both sides of this. The Guptas came, they were defeated. There was the interest from the black business. The black business groupings, many of them had signed contracts or agreements with bidding companies from abroad. And some of them, of course, that they'd been promised all sorts of things in this particular instance. But they were angry with me when I insisted that, yes, the bidding companies can bring whoever they want, but the 30% broad-based black economic empowerment is not going to be appointed through a behind-the-scene kind of scheme. We want to ensure that that is advertised. So if company X, let's take Alstom, it brings Lucky Montana as their BE partner. We are not going to credit that. So they can bring Lucky Montana as into their bid, but what will happen is that we'll appoint separately for the 30% so that you don't have the kind of deal. So we're trying to cut people to front and doing all sorts of unlawful things, and money changing hands, or politically connected individuals to go and lobby that this be awarded to someone else because they're part of that particular transaction. We wanted the best trains for the country. And the trains that are running in Pretoria on the Mamelodi line that are being tested, they rank amongst the best trains in the world. And I'm proud to say, as a former Group CEO of PRASA sitting today, that these trains will serve our country for at least the next 40 years. It's the best investment for this. For this. So when we change the strategy for BEE, some of the black business groupings were not happy, and they attacked me. And I think that some of those are recorded in newspapers, as it were. International rolling stock manufacturers are not innocent themselves, because they lobbied, they did all sorts of things. And if you analyze, and if you say that you want to fight against state capture, we think that it's only about the Guptas. Let's look at international rolling stock manufacturers, or even OEMs generally. You'll see that when they bid, they put what you call, Honorable Chair, a marketing fund. We need to ask, what is a marketing fund? The marketing fund has nothing to do with marketing what they'll be able to deliver. It's effectively about paying bribes. So we need to change. I'm told that if I listen to what is being said in the media, I'm supposed to be one of the most corrupt people in this country. But I think that for us to deal with that, we need to go to the facts and investigate these marketing budgets. Where did the money go? We've got the fiscal, what is it called, Finance Intelligence Center. They've got to look at the money flows. Where did it go? If it went to Montana, then let the Hawks and the police deal with that. But you can see that they were playing a major role into all of those. Everyone wanted this tender because it was amongst the biggest tenders in the world at that time. In 2012, the PRASA rolling stock was the biggest, if not the second biggest, considering what the Chinese were doing in there. But there was also, the board of PRASA was subsequently changed. It was not changed by the Guptas. It was changed by our own people that I trusted. The Honorable Minister of Transport at that time, Minister Dipuo Peters, when she was appointed to replace Minister Ben Martins, she met with us, and I'm recording it here, in page 21, page 22, and page 23. She wanted us to cancel or delay this rolling stock tender. Again, together with the chairman of the board, we refused, because we knew that if you delay the procurement of new trains, Metro Rail will certainly collapse. I know that in the media today it said that Metro Rail is in crisis, in the Western Cape, and I see groupings saying that, no, it's because of corruption. In the Western Cape, more specifically, let's explain it. The Western Cape requires at least 140 train sets to run a service today. But Metro Rail is only operating 65. So it's half of what is happening here. And that is why you find that the trains are not moving, because half of the fleet is not there to meet. And as you understand, the Western Cape is the only part of the country where the use of train services is over 50%. It's actually it has declined because of the poor service over the years, but it was actually some stage around 58, 60%, as it were. So we were worried. We didn't want to cancel or postpone because we knew that we would be in trouble. The situation has caught up with us. Minister Dipuo Peters had wanted Deputy Minister at that time, the chairman of the board, and I to postpone or cancel after she was appointed. We refused. And in those discussions she had with us, she then indicated to us that she will change the PRASA board. You remember the Guptas failed in 2012. But in 2014 she did it. She told us when we refused, we explained to her logically, it will be unlawful for us to cancel this RFP. Because the only time you'll cancel is only if there are serious breaches or you can't find a solution. But if you tell a winning bidder or a preferred bidder that you are canceling the bid, they'll take you to court and you'll pay them 50 billion rands without the trains being delivered in the country. So we refused. We explained, we had also obtained a legal opinion to say, will this be done? Can this be done? And they told us very clear, you cannot cancel this tender. And the minister then told us, I intend to change the board. I intend to bring Mr. Popo Molefe as the chairman of the board, and the rest is history. Now, the minister, of course, didn't work alone. He kept on consulting with the chairman of the board, and he told the chairman, I'm busy, I'm working with Luthuli House in the changing of the board of PRASA. And he met, and he was busy with the person he consulted there was the former Treasurer General of the ANC, Mr. Zweli Mkhize. And Zweli Mkhize, as the Treasurer General of PRASA, or rather of the ANC, I apologize specifically to the other political parties. PRASA is not both. Chair, Zweli Mkhize, as the Treasurer General of the ANC, elected in 2012, started interacting with us in 2013, with me more specifically. And I was invited to many ANC events, activities, including fundraising activities. But in one of the meetings that I had with the Treasurer General, together with Mr. Sfiso Buthelezi at the Senten Sun Hotel, when we met there, Mr. Mkhize told me and said, PRASA is due to pay 465 million rands to Swifambo Rail Leasing, the company that is building not the commuter trains but the locomotives. So this was the first payment in line with the contract. And he said, we want 10% of that 465. I refused. I said, like the Guptas, it will be unlawful. I can't tell that company to pay you 10% of, because they'll come back to me and said, you said you must pay the ANC that 10%. And if you read my submissions, we were attacked. The former Treasurer General attacked us. And what was interesting that he repeated some of the accusations that Minister Dipuo Peters made to us. Minister Dipuo Peters, when she started the process, she said, we are not going to be controlled by the French. And we had to explain to a minister, we are not controlled by the French. We are guided by the condition, the objective condition of Metro Rail. It will collapse. When we refused what the former Treasurer General wanted, the 10%, he then said two things. One, that we are giving a big 50 billion rand tender or contract to the French colonialists who have such a terrible track record in Africa. That's what he said. Well, secondly, he then said, yeah, you guys are helping us on many things, but it's quite clear that you are involved in these deals. You guys are getting more of the money and you're giving us peanuts. I was angry. I was angry and irritated because I've never been involved in corrupt activities. But my chairman knew he didn't want me to respond. He said, I'll deal with it. A very close friend and comrade of Dr. Zweli Mkhize. He explained to him that the procurement process that we followed, and that if government wants us to choose, then let's change the procurement law in the country. You can't tell us and say, go and out on a bidding process. People put a bid and they win, and you are not prepared to award it to them, and you say, no, we don't like them, that the French who kill our people in there, write it in the law, so that when I act in line with the law, that is done. It was unfortunate both the poor Peters and Dr. Zweli Mkhize were angry with us, and they collaborated to appoint and change the board of PRASA. And the board of PRASA is appointed in 2014, in August, 1st of August 2014, was a board that was determined by Minister Dipuo Peters and Dr. Zweli Mkhize. Of course, it was, and I did state that it ultimately went to cabinet. All the members of that board, but 3, out of the 11 members, 8 were nominated properly by members of the public. But 3 were not nominated by members of the public. When Minister Ben Martins, before he moved from transport, he had already advertised the board of PRASA. People applied. But when the new minister came, he took some of the names there, but he then said, I want to bring my own people there. And that's where the deal between Minister Peters and Treasurer General at that time happened. Dipuo Peters then brought in, Honorable Dipuo Peters brought in Popo Molefe and William Steenkamp. Those are people that she had previously appointed to the board of Petro SA. And of course, the Treasurer General brought in Chartered Accountant, Ms. Zodo Manase. And the board of PRASA was made, and of course, Dr. Zodo Manase was given the responsibility to manage the audits and the finances of PRASA, as it were. Now, what happened, of course, is that the new board, when it came in there, and it happened when we came to Cape Town here in 2014, in October, just a few months before this, after this board was appointed, I think it was about 2.5 months, we were presenting to the Standing Committee on Finance. I think at that time chaired by Mr. Paul Mashatile, the Treasurer General of the ANC today. In that discussion, after the presentation, the new chairman, Mr. Popo Molefe, met with members of the board, or rather of the Portfolio Committee. The chair of the Portfolio Committee and other members, and he told them very clearly that he's got a mandate to deal with corruption at PRASA. He specifically mentioned Lucky Montana works for the Guptas, and he works, to use the words that he told them, he works for Butternut, which is a derogatory word to refer to the president. So that's what Mr. Molefe told members of the committee, and he went on to advocate to then set up the structures. And for honorable members, they went on to try and investigate and try to establish my link with the Guptas. PRASA spent 200 million rands investigating the link between Lucky Montana, the Guptas, and President Zuma. So So this is what happened. And let me say and explain that these investigations, I know that honorable members of parliament have been told that the investigation was a forensic investigation. A forensic investigation has been a small part of this. What the investigation was doing, that's what my two letters that the chair, honorable chair, referred to. I wrote a letter to the Minister of State Security at that time, Minister Mahlobo. I was subjected to one of the most vicious campaigns, subjected to surveillance. I was followed everywhere I was going. My house was broken into, my house in Waterkloof was broken into 3 times. Documents were taken. In my house, they would leave valuable things. They went for the computer. They went for memory sticks. These are not ordinary criminals who were doing this work. For a period after I left PRASA in 2015 until 2017, I've been subjected by people I call my own comrades to one of the most vicious campaigns. Yes, the Guptas are criminals. The Guptas wanted to steal from PRASA. But my own comrades who wanted to steal themselves did worse things. At that time, PRASA chair had given me, when I was still CEO, that issued me with a firearm. And on many occasions, I had to defend my family. Some of the guys who were chasing me, I had to fight with them using my firearm. But I reported the matter to the police. So the letters that the chair referred to, I'm putting on record. In their reports in this investigation, they state very clearly that they will conduct a surveillance program. I was subjected to this. It's unlawful. So even if we say we want to fight state capture, we want to fight corruption, in a democratic state, it's very important that we do not allow that the means justify the ends, that people use any method that they like. And when I was defending my family, I was defending myself, and some of the people I caught red-handed. One of them by the name of Dion Pinar, I caught them in Pretoria, and at a firearm, he ran away. I had a property in Saxonwold, not the Shebeen, not the Guptas, my own property that I stayed in 2009. An old apartheid security operative had followed me to my house. I took the firearm, he ran away, and we had the car chase. My life was at risk, my family was at risk, but it was not done by the Guptas or the enemy, it was done by my own comrades. And what happened is that after I've protected myself, PRASA went to the Brooklyn police station and said, we've given Lucky a firearm, we want it back. Very interesting, what a coincidence. I chased a man at my house with a firearm because they are taking me, and PRASA realized or remembered, oh, this man is armed. We gave him, so can the police go in? And I had to tell the police, no. I'm still on notice period. Yes, PRASA said I mustn't serve the notice, but the firearm it given to me is in line with my contract. I'll give it after 4 months because I needed it to protect myself. That's what has been done. In the name of fighting corruption, I've been subjected to this. These guys have conducted massive intelligence operation, and they're writing it in their reports. They don't understand that it's actually unlawful for them to do things like those. The letters that I put here, Chair, effectively speak to all of those things. So in conclusion, I'm happy that I didn't fight only the Guptas. I fought both sides. And I'm happy today that I'm rejected by both sides of the divide. The corrupt this side and the corrupt this side. And I'm hoping that as we speak of renewal, we are going to take measures to deal with the corrupt on both sides, irrespective of who they are. If it's Lucky Montana, let's deal with him. But I know, for example, that in all the investigations that have been done against me, I felt that, oh, there's this thing at PRASA, there's this thing at PRASA. It happened during the tenure of Lucky Montana. I still have to hear. There was money that was stolen. It was moved from there. It ended up in Montana's account. And I think that I provide even to the honorable members in my submission some of the massive media campaign and this will be my last point, Advocate. Some of the most vicious media campaign that has been run. Everyone knows, you go to Parliament, I meet members of Parliament, like, why did you buy toll trains? And I urge honorable members to read here my submission and see that the story of toll trains is so false. All those trains are parked in Braamfontein. The long-distance trains has collapsed because some journalists wrote that PRASA bought toll trains. They used the wrong measurements. I provided the facts to prove once and for all that is false. And I'm hoping that as we deal with these issues, we'd realize that this battle, this task to transform our country is far bigger than just cleaning the Guptas. We must clean the Guptas. There's no doubt about it. But the problem is far deeper that we must address, and I'm hoping that we must deal with it. I provide other details here. The ANC, which is my own organization, said I must be dealt with swiftly, and I welcomed it when my own organization says, and I know that it represents society, it must take that stance. But the ANC has not applied the rules also in an equal way. I've seen the statements written or issued by the ANC, the former Secretary General. He's saying, we never received any money from any company.